2NURFM.com, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.
Having a look at state and federal politics. We like to do it each week, and we're joined by the University of Newcastle's Associate Professor in Politics, Dr. Jim Joes. And I just led off by saying, Jim, I can't believe it. I left Australia a month ago to go to Indonesia, and I had a female Prime Minister here, and I came back, and we've got Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister again.
Yes, good morning,
Dave.
Things
change in a short period of time.
Things certainly do. You turn your back for a minute. And
well, we speculated for a while leading up to it. What would happen? Would he challenge? Would he not challenge? Well, he did, and he was successful.
Yes, I think as we just, not so much when you were here, but after you left, I discussed with Jane that part of the issue then became, do they go or do they not? And they've taken the punt. The figures came out. Internal party polling was basically saying that we're on a hiding to nothing. And when a couple of key Victorian seats looked like tottering, in particular Bill Shorten's seat, there was a decided shift in, okay, we know that we're definitely done with Julia Gillard as our leader. We have nothing to lose by changing. Now, as we've seen in the past couple of weeks, the past 3 or 4 weeks, a resurgence in the ALP's fortunes. Rudd as Prime Minister has had an effect which has brought them back into serious contention. Whether that will be enough to get them over the line on whatever day is called for the election remains to be seen.
Some said that we were heading to an election that the Labor Party were certain to lose. Is there a chance that this could be turned around now? Because this would be the biggest comeback since Lazarus if Rudd wins this.
Well, yes, I suppose. The current polling figures suggest that Labor has now a primary vote on the recent Galaxy poll. Labor has a primary vote that is now better than when Julia Gillard took them to the 2010 election. So that augurs well, assuming that that's a real indication of support across the country. And that translates into currently a 50-50 two-party preferred vote, which means that it's on that basis a very close election. What isn't easy to determine, Dave, is just how uniform that will translate across the country. Certainly some seats will remain Labor quite easily and some will remain Liberal, but which seats, where the votes will actually count in the various marginal seats and some of the seats where there's a less than 5% gap for the sitting member, it's difficult to know whether this 50-50 two-party preferred outcome, shall we say, will translate in the same way across each and every electorate. And we know in various elections, we've seen in the past, where a party can actually not win, shall we say, on the primary, that they even on a two-party preferred, I think in 1998, the Howard government was returned, even though it had, I think, 49% of the two-party preferred vote, but the number of seats it won entitled it to form government. And similarly, there was an election where, during the Hawke and Keating period, where the Labor Party had less than the two-party preferred, but they won enough seats. So while it might be 50-50 on the two-party preferred, it's an issue then of how that translates seat by seat. And as I've just said, the government the Labor government might win if it falls its way with the number of seats, even if it might get just under 50%. And similarly, Tony Abbott may lead the coalition to victory with just under 50% if the seats fall the way that he needs them to get the majority.
Jim, a thing that's surprising me is that the opposition leader, Tony Abbott, isn't in attack mode, isn't attacking them, belittling them, saying it's farcical what's happened with the party, even issues that are there at the moment. He's not really attacking them or saying, I have something that's better than this. One of those, for instance, of course, is the what's going on with the asylum seekers at the moment. That's a major issue. And he's sort of saying, well, his alternative is very much the same as what's been put on the table by the government.
Well, that's an interesting question, Dave. What I find really quite curious is that the opposition have gone from being sure-footed and on the attack, as you say, taking the fight up to and beyond the government, and basically setting the agenda. The opposition has set the agenda for probably most of the time of the Labor period of government from 2010. Now we're seeing that Kevin Rudd is managing to set the agenda in the opposite direction and putting the opposition in a sort of defensive mode. And it's almost as if Tony Abbott and his inner circle are not quite sure how to tackle Kevin Rudd.
It's almost like he's intimidated, or he's fearful of doing or saying the wrong thing. And
it's a curious situation, because what we have, one would have thought, I mean, and it's almost like the opposite of what is the case is transpiring. And let me try to explain that. We have an economy which is regarded as one of the strongest in the world. The popular perception of our economy is that it's weak, it's catastrophic, that the government can't manage it, etc. But the reality is quite different. This is not looking at cost of living issues and so forth. This is just simply looking at the big, shall we say, macroeconomic indicators. So the reality is, globally, we're doing exceptionally well, better than any other economy in the world. The perception is we're doing really badly. Kevin Rudd, as the now successful leader of the Labor Party, spent 3 years quite happily sabotaging his own party, quite determinedly pursuing his own personal ambition under the guise, shall we say, under the cloak of wanting to save the party from itself, etc. And there's all the evidence says that this man is totally duplicitous, totally untrustworthy. He betrayed his colleagues at every turn whenever it suited him, and he does deals and he makes agreements and he breaks them whenever he likes, so long as he moves a step forward to where he personally wants to go. On the other hand, Julia Gillard was portrayed as exactly that, as totally duplicitous, totally unreliable, the sort of epithet of Julia, etc. Now, she may well have been just as duplicitous as any other politician, but no more so than some of the more famous ones in our political history, in particular in our very recent history, and indeed no more so than any leader of a party. But what I'm sort of getting at here is that Tony Abbott now has a leader that he can actually quite legitimately and quite forcefully point to a whole range of evidence of would you trust this person to lead the country, etc. The general popular opinion is, yes, we would. That seems to be the message coming out of the polls, yet the evidence is quite different. So we have this really interesting situation where what we can show with evidence says one thing, what the polls and popular opinion and perception says is quite other. And I guess what I find strange is that this should be an ideal opportunity for Tony Abbott and the coalition to be able to hammer Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister and paint him in a much more negative light.
But they're not.
But what's happening at the moment, it seems it's almost like they're a bit like the deer in the middle of the road with the headlights on it, and they're not
startled.
sure what to do and how to go about it. They're trying to manoeuvre and trying to suggest, that they're poor economic managers, playing on that perception, but gradually perception and reality will start to align a little bit more effectively, because Kevin Rudd has generally not the same level of hostile media, so that the message that he has is able to get out a little more effectively, maybe a lot more effectively. Certainly when Julia Gillard was Prime Minister, she had real difficulty getting the message out because there were almost no areas of the media that were at all sympathetic or willing to put a positive light on what she was doing. For whatever reason, we can deal with that and explore that on another occasion. But certainly Kevin Rudd has a much better opportunity at the moment, and he seems to be able to get away with quite a bit. And this is a problem for Tony Abbott. He had all the media, in effect, working with him without him having to do very much. Now he's facing a situation where the media is not so hostile to the government yet. Okay, I mean, I noticed the Daily Telegraph has taken a bit of a shall we say, strong line against Labor. Rudd the Wrecker, I think, is one of their little cartoony things that they use occasionally. But basically, Tony Abbott, as now the coalition, now has to think about real strategy in positioning the Labor Party in a totally negative light. And I'm not sure that he quite knows how to do it. And the Me Tooism, we're going to do the same thing on Nauru that you're going to do in Papua New Guinea, all that just seems to be, a sense of, I'm not sure where I'm going here as the leader of the opposition. He's gone from a situation where he had total command of the political stage in many respects, and he had the Prime Minister well and truly on the back foot. Change of leadership. He now can't find a way to push Kevin Rudd into a corner and perhaps fracture some of the new image that Kevin Rudd has projected. Whether he can find the entry point to begin to get those fractures happening remains to be seen, because Kevin Rudd's vulnerable when he's under pressure, but Tony Abbott doesn't seem to actually
no pressure being put on.
Have found the pressure point to actually press at this stage. So we wait and see. I mean, perhaps his advisors will figure out a strategy, and then we might see a bit more of a shall we say, struggle between the two leaders.
We'll find out more. We'll talk more about it next Tuesday. Thank you, Jim.
My pleasure, Dave.
Joining us from the University of Newcastle, Associate Professor in Politics, Dr. Jim Joes.